Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the IXICO investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time using the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Just simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. Before we begin, we'd like to submit the following poll, and if you could give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. I'd now like to hand over to the management team from IXICO. Good afternoon to you all.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you, everybody. I'd just like to thank you for attending today's call, in which Grant, our CFO, will cover the financial highlights for our first half of 2023. I will update on the progress we're making in the rollout of our precision in neuroscience strategy introduced at the end of last year. And Robin, our Chief Scientific Officer, will speak to how we're positioning IXICO to support error detection in post-marketing surveillance in new AD therapies. From this first slide, you see that our strapline is Advanced Analytics Intelligent Insights. In addition today to hearing how our world-class neuroimaging analytics capabilities power our ability to win in the marketplace against often much larger competitors, you'll also hear how we've been investing to scale up our operational capabilities to support our growth ambitions. We're now able to deploy a robust end-to-end imaging data and analysis platform that enables us to deliver services across a much larger number of clinical trial projects across all phases of development. We believe that IXICO represents, therefore, a compelling investment case, and which I'd like to illustrate now by describing our company purpose. Thank you. So the purpose of the company is to advance medicine and human health by turning data into clinically meaningful information, providing valuable new insights in neuroscience to our clients in the pharmaceutical industry. Fundamentally, our measure of success is our ability to improve the return on investment in drug development and reduce the risk and uncertainty in central nervous system clinical trials for our pharmaceutical clients. We continue to build on our very strong franchise in rare neurological diseases, in particular in Huntington's disease, but as previously stated, also intend to further penetrate the larger therapeutic areas. To deliver on our purpose over the next 3 to 5 years, we plan to double down on the opportunities we've identified, in particular in Alzheimer's disease. To do so, we plan to pursue organic and inorganic opportunities to better address the market opportunity in North America in particular, and also establish new partnerships to bridge the divide from clinical development into clinical practice. Now, we all know it takes billions of dollars to develop new medicines over many years, and herein lies the opportunity for IXICO as a specialist neuroimaging CRO. For example, global data forecasts that Eisai's Alzheimer's drug Leqembi, anticipated to be approved later in the summer, is projected to generate $12.9 billion in sales for Eisai by 2028. However, we also know that over 90% of all clinical trials do not result in approved drugs, with early terminations being part of the landscape that all CROs operate in, and with CNS therapeutic areas being recognized as a particularly difficult area. So this then reflects the short and long-term risk rewards of investing in a company such as IXICO, whose purpose it is to support the pharmaceutical industry in the development of new medicines. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Grant to provide the financial highlights.
Thank you, Julio, and good afternoon to everyone. Before I dive into the detail of our half-year numbers, I'd like to give you a reminder of the revenue track record we've delivered over the last few years, as well as where we see our revenues heading for this full year and for 2024. I'd like to dig a little bit into the results so that you have an overview of what has and continues to drive our revenues. You'll recall, for those of you who've listened to us before, in the few years up to 2020, we saw rapid revenue growth, driven in particular by the services we provided to a large global phase 3 Huntington's disease clinical trial. That was the largest HD trial ever run, was a high revenue project, and provided important visibility and validation of our operational and analytical capabilities to the market at large. Our revenues peaked in 2020 at 9.5 million before we received the news that from our client that HD drug being trialled within that phase 3 trial was showing insufficient efficacy when compared to associated safety risks. This led to the trial being descoped in 2021 and closed altogether in 2022. The graph on this slide shows our revenues across the period split between those revenues generated from that phase 3 HD trial and those generated by other trials. In total across the period, you can see the decline in our revenues from 9.5 million in 2020 to what will be a recent low point of 7 million expected this year, before we expect to see a return to revenue growth in 2024. Within this, however, is a much more positive picture and underlines why we feel very confident about our medium and longer term prospects. In 2020, the HD trial constituted more than 50% of our revenues at 5.1 million of the 9.5 million we reported, with revenues coming from other projects at 4.4 million. Since then, we've been successful in winning more contracts, particularly in early phases, with more clients, meaning that our non-HD phase 3 revenues have been growing strongly, and we expect to see a CAGR, a compound annual growth rate, for revenues from those trials of over 15% across the 4 years from 2020 to 2024. What this means is that whilst in total our revenues have declined in the last couple of years, the relative risk associated with the revenues we've been reporting has been decreasing, alongside the increasing diversity of contracts and clients that we've been winning, which puts us in a stronger position to achieve sustainable revenue growth as we look forward. Turning to my next slide, this shows our revenues, our gross margin and our EBITDA for the first 6 months of this financial year. That's shown in teal or the turquoisey colour and is compared to the same metrics over the same periods in the last 3 financial years, which is shown in grey. Looking on the graph on the left, with revenues of 3.2 million in the first half of this year, we are seeing the final comparator impact to our revenues of the cessation of that large phase 3 HD trial. In other words, we expect to see the revenues reported in the second half of this year and across 2024 to show growth relative to this last 6-month period, meaning that essentially we see the first 6 months of this year as being the trough in our post-2020 revenue performance, with revenues generated by more recently won contracts continuing to grow, and with that negative trending overlay of the loss of the revenues from the phase 3 HD trial now removed from our performance metrics. If you then look to the middle graph at gross margin, we report a first half gross margin of 46%, which is a drop in the margin compared to our recent history, and is as we expected and have previously communicated in our updates, both verbal and via RNS. As a reminder, this is driven by 3 factors. The primary factor is that our revenues are now coming from earlier phase trials, which have a relatively lower analysis component compared to other service streams, and which are relatively higher cost for us to deliver as they tend to be more labour intensive. Later phase trials, such as the phase 3 HD trial, tend to have a higher analysis component, which are higher margin as our analysis pipelines are either fully or semi-automated. The second factor in the margin picture is that I highlight the operational leverage element of our margins. We have a cost model that benefits rapidly from operational leverage as we grow, and as we've seen over the last few years. But similarly, a decline in revenues, especially one that we anticipate to be short-term, as is the case with now, quickly becomes visible in our margins. The third point, of course, is that, like many other companies at the moment, the impact of inflation is, of course, a challenge and one to which we're not immune. So that combination of weaker revenues and gross margin, along with the important and continued focus on investing for our longer term opportunity, means that, as you can see in the graph on the right, we report a loss for the first half period since 2018. This, again, was as expected. As we look forward and we start to see our revenues grow again, the benefits of the investments that we've made during the last few years will become clearer. The cash that we generated via our operations has been invested in our technology and is also being invested in our sales and marketing function, which has been impacted by a relatively high level of staff turnover recent years, but has nonetheless achieved a strong new contract wins record, and we believe there's much more that can come from that. What this all means is that as we look forward, we see the opportunity to grow our revenues both as a consequence of the biopharmaceutical industry's increasing level of investment in neurological disease research, but also our confidence that because of the investments that we've made, and the strengthened service offering that we have, we are well positioned to extend our market share within that growing market. The decisions that we've taken as a management team and as a board reflect our confidence in the market opportunity, which has not gone away and indeed has very much strengthened over recent years as a result, in particular, of significant progress being made in neurological disease drug development, most obviously exemplified currently by the recent announcements that have been well publicized in the Alzheimer's disease space. Our ability to execute on the decisions, however, as is shown in the next slide, if you can turn to that now, thank you, is to a large extent underpinned by the strength of our balance sheet. This slide shows our cash, our net assets, and our order book position at the end of the first 6 months of this year, again shown in teal or turquoise colour, as compared to the end of the previous 3 financial years, shown in grey. As a reminder, we raised cash in 2018 for the purpose of investing in our market offering and capabilities. And in investing those monies, alongside monies that we've generated via our profitability since 2019, has been an important focus of the company, of the IXICO team. Specifically, we've strengthened our operational capabilities, extended our portfolio of neurological analysis tools, and invested both in our IT infrastructure and our next generation image capture and analysis platform. Irrespective of those investments, we continue to hold 5 million of cash at the end of the end of March, end of the half-year period. Also within that period, we generated 0.2 million of operating cash, and we remain debt-free. As those investments that we have been making are to a large extent to support our ability to scale across the medium and long term, a portion of those investments are reflected in our balance sheet, with our net asset position at 31st of March at 11.9 million, which itself includes working capital of 6.3 million. Across the period, you can see from the graph on the right a decline in our order book. I'll now go into detail on this over the coming couple of slides, but in summary, this reflects the significant impact of the HD phase 3 trial descope and cessation, which along with a couple of smaller trial descopes have removed approximately 40 million of contracts from our order book across 2021 and 2022. And it's a reflection of the number of new, albeit smaller contracts that we've won across the same period. That means whilst we see an overall decline in order book value, it remains strong at close to 2 times our expected revenues for this year. Turning to the next slide. This slide shows the bridge of movement within our order book since March 2022, i.e. covering the 12-month period through to the half-year close at 31st of March of this year. What this reflects is that with the 31st of March 2022 starting point of a 12.6 million order book, our order book has benefited from 11.6 million of new client trial wins, partially offset by 7.9 million of revenues that we've recognised and 3 million of small trial descopes, the largest being a 0.6 million descope, which we announced early in December last year. This has resulted in our order book closing the year at 13.3 million at half year, 0.7 million above the same time point in the prior year, but below where we were at September 2022 at our financial year end close position, which was 16 million. And what I want to highlight there is that this reflects the non-linear rate of contract wins, where we had a particularly strong second half of the year last year, and of contract descopes, where we have suffered the majority of these descopes in the first half of this year. So to really get a feel for how our bookings record has been, which will always be lumpy, it's worth looking at across a longer time period. And what we've seen is that we have seen consistently levels of new contract wins over the last 3 full financial years of at least 1.5 times, and in some cases more, compared to the value of the revenues that we recognised across that same time period. And if you now turn to the next slide, you can see the impact of these new trial wins on the makeup of our order book. What the pie charts on this slide show to the left is the change in mix in our order book as at the 31st of March 2023 compared to how the order book was constituted at the 30th of September 2020. The change is stark and reflects a significant shift from an order book dominated by a single large phase 3 trial to one much more tilted towards earlier phase trials, i.e. phases 1 and 2. This has led to a much reduced client and project concentration within our order book, which reduces our reliance and the accompanying risk associated with any particular trial. The bar graph on the right shows this with our largest client now at little over 20% of our order book today, compared to approximately 80% in 2020. What's not shown on this slide, but is within that order book picture, is that we've also seen an approximate 70% increase in the number of studies that we're supporting today compared to 2020. The point here is that with a shift of our order book moving to earlier phase trials, we actually have a significant latent opportunity looking forward, where those trials that are early phase, where they're successful, we are well positioned to follow those trials into phase 2 and to phase 3. And that's what gives us a significant confidence based on what's in our order book today, that we have the opportunity to grow sustainably over the coming years. In terms of our therapeutic focus, that remains very much in HD and other rare neurological diseases, but we've been making some good strides in AD as well, with AD now making up approximately 20% of our order book, with our focus, as you'll hear from Julio and Robin, very much on expanding this further in the coming periods. I'd just like now to move on to my final slide before I hand back to Julio. And this slide focuses on Trial Tracker, where I want to provide a bit more additional color to this significant and critical piece of infrastructure and a significant investment that we've been making as a company over the last few years. So for those of you who haven't heard us speak before, Trial Tracker is our end-to-end clinical trials image capture and analysis platform. What it does is it provides a web-based upload for neurological images that enables imaging sites located across the world to upload brain scans from imaging scanners, PET, MRI, etc., as well as relevant clinical data into our centralized image management platform. The system alerts us automatically to scans of poor quality or that contain specific issues, and also automatically pseudonymizes the scan for data protection purposes. The system then presents the image for manual visual QC, quality control, to check for any problems with the image not picked up by that automated quality control. If the image is then passed, it then is transferred automatically to our radiological network, who read the scan to check for patient eligibility, to make sure the right patients for the trial, and also patient safety to ensure that the drug that they're on is not causing any harm. The read results are then provided to the client, and we complete that process of scan upload from anywhere in the world to a completed radiological read within normally a 5-day turnaround, and are able to offer expedited services of 3 days. Now, following the image read, we then pass that image to our data analysis pipelines, which have been developed using highly contextualized data to identify and measure specific disease-based biomarkers. The analysis can be volumetric, advanced, or exploratory, depending on what our client needs. But each set of analysis then is submitted to our own internal expert science review, where results are collated and transferred to the sponsor at defined times during the study. This process is quite rightly very highly regulated, as it relates to patient data, which are part of clinical trial results that may ultimately lead to a drug being approved for prescription to patients. Consequently, we are subject to regular client audits. We must be able to show the detail and quality of our system validation evidence, the resilience and robustness of our systems, and the system security infrastructure. These are really significant requirements in terms of ongoing investment, especially considering the rate of change within technology, and particularly in today's environment of high cyber risk. The point that we're making here is that the differentiator of our platform and the very significant barrier to entry of prospective competitors is not just about what the system can do today, it's also about how it is able to respond to the challenges that will arise tomorrow. Clinical trials take years to complete. The data is highly sensitive and must be stored in a highly organized way, with high and increasing levels of security, and with a resilience and robustness that delivers a minimum system downtime, mitigates for risk of data loss, and maintains the integrity of those data, which may constitute hundreds or thousands of trial participant images collected over several years from multiple global locations at multiple longitudinal time points. To ensure that we stay at the forefront of this, we've invested significantly in our next generation trial tracker, which we expect to launch later this year. This builds on over a decade of development of our existing trial tracker platform, but is a full redesign utilizing Microsoft's Azure cloud technology portfolio. We are hugely excited about the capabilities that this platform will provide us with, bringing on microservices technology available within the cloud. This platform is not only resilient, secure, and highly scalable, but it's also highly extensible, meaning we'll be able to add capabilities to it in a much more streamlined basis than we have been able to with our current system. The ROI on this investment won't be seen in the immediate short term, but is the keystone for the business to scale further and faster as we look to the future, and means that we're well positioned to do so. And with that, I'm now going to pass back to Julia, who will outline how the system dovetails into our precision in neuroscience strategy.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you very much. So if we jump to slide 12, which is the precision neuroscience strategy. So I just want to give some highlights on each of the pillars. So the build pillar, we've made, as you heard, good progress in building our imaging CRO scale, providing capacity to run a broader range of client projects across all phases of development. We expect to further enhance this capability with the launch of the next generation platform that Grant has just described. During the period, we're also delighted to be awarded a Tier 1 preferred vendor status by a top 5 pharma company. This is for all early and late phase MRI imaging studies in Huntington's and Alzheimer's, and also in a core PET imaging analysis method across all neuroscience indications. Now, whilst this is not an award for any specific contract, it does mean that IXICO will be at the table for all the to receive all of the RFPs from this company going forwards in terms of these given indications. On the flip side, though, during the first half of this year, we did experience some delays in contracting and project startup timelines, and we need to be mindful that that could continue to the remainder of the FY23 and potentially going into FY24. But as we look forward, and with the development of our order book as being a priority and focus of the business, building the business development team and making those investments in our commercial capabilities is key to ensuring we grow and capture the opportunities identified in our pipeline. In the innovate pillar, we continue to see very strong demand for our specialist AI neuroimaging analytic services, in particular in support of the development of new biomarkers in CNS clinical trials. And this has been exemplified by partnerships with the Global Alzheimer's Platform in North America and the CHDI Foundation, both evidencing the traction we're building in the important North American market. The partnership between CHDI, IXICO, and 3 biotech partners is to develop and validate MRI-based biomarkers in HD analysis of over 6,000 patient-level datasets using our proprietary IXICO IXIQ.ai algorithms. And since its launch in February 2022, that new platform has been deployed on over 10 clinical trials. So we're delighted with the pickup and the adoption of that new capability. Third pillar, the penetrate pillar, in its financial highlights, Grant has illustrated how the makeup of our order book reflects the progress we're making in penetrating early phase trials so that we have more shots on goal for future later stage clinical trials. Having demonstrated now our ability to deliver both large studies in HD and AD, as well as winning early phase studies, we're well placed to follow the assets of those current projects in our order book into the later stages of development. The final 2 stages, the bridge pillar and enhanced pillar. The bridge pillar, we're very excited about, and Robin will talk to that in a moment. With the anticipated approval of 2 additional amyloid drugs during FY23, we believe we're well placed to support and develop a post-marketing surveillance area solution. Robin will go into the details of how we envisage we can achieve what we're describing, a bridge from the clinical trial to the clinical practice environment for these new therapies which have known side effects. And so that's that post-marketing surveillance that we feel is a very exciting new opportunity for us. And then finally, in terms of the enhanced pillar, we continue to explore partnership opportunities and where they can accelerate our organic growth trajectory, and obviously we'll announce those when appropriate to do so. So if we move on to the next slide, a couple I just want to highlight the 2 areas. One is the innovate and the other one is the bridge pillars. On the innovate pillar, the fundamentals of a precision in neuroscience strategy means that you need very rich disease-specific cohort data. And IXICO is very well placed because of our relationships and partnerships and position in the marketplace. And within the clinical trials marketplace, going back to the company purpose, it's widely recognized that recruitment of patients is slow, expensive, and is prone to a high degree of variance. So this is an area that we feel we can provide significant value to our clients. The pharmaceutical industry is looking to partners like IXICO to support a more personalized approach to drug development, i.e. recognizing that not all people are the same in terms of how they might respond to new treatments. And very specifically, our access to data sets from partnerships such as Global Alzheimer's in Alzheimer's and the CHDI Foundation in Huntington's means that we have the access to these data sets that enable us to provide validated best-in-class analytical solutions to support improved patient recruitment. As a reminder in relation to GAP, we were chosen by GAP to collect and read PET images in their bioHERME studies, which was around about 1,000 patients, with the purpose of validating digital and blood-based biomarkers for Alzheimer's against the gold standard PET imaging techniques of the day. The quote from John Dwyer, the president of GAP, in this slide illustrates the potential impact of pre-screening algorithms for superior clinical trial design. We also see opportunities to leverage our capabilities to address the recent announced FDA requirements to improve recruitment of traditionally underserved populations into clinical trials, and also to support the development of diagnostic biomarkers as these new therapies come to market. And then finally, just as a setting the scene, if you like, for Robin's slides, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the opportunity we see for IXICO in post-marketing surveillance. Just hours, literally hours after Eli Lilly released positive phase 3 data for their anti-amyloid Alzheimer's treatment, donanemab, on the 3rd of May, the commissioner of the FDA was already discussing the implications and the need for post-marketing data collection. Now, it's unusual for anybody, for the FDA to publicly comment on drug approvals before they're approved, but here the commissioner has obviously made a very strong statement around the likelihood of this drug coming to market, and therefore the requirement for an evidence-ready system that could help accumulate much of the data that's going to be required to ensure that the clinical practitioners are confident in prescribing the drugs as they come to market. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Robin, and he can introduce our plans and how we plan to position IXICO to support the development of such an evidence-ready system for ARIA. Robin.
Thanks, Julio. If you go to the next slide, please. So that introduces my section, and on the following slides, I will provide some background on the potential market opportunity to deploy our services in post-market surveillance in AD drugs. I'd like to start by giving a brief recap on the recent progress that we've seen around the validation and approval of anti-amyloid monoclonal antibodies, and then go on to discuss how this offers a potential opportunity to translate our services from a clinical trial application into a post-market application. So, as we know, there are 4 relevant drugs that have completed phase 3 trials over the past couple of years. Starting on the left, we've seen Eisai announce positive phase 3 results on the lecanemab drug in November. And the company has since received accelerated approval based on the phase 2 results of the study of the drug that was given by the FDA in January. A full approval has been filed based on the phase 3 results, with an outcome expected in July 2023. We have since seen an announcement by the US Veterans Association to provide reimbursement for that drug, which is a key step, of course, towards more widespread adoption. More recently, in May, we've seen Lilly announce positive phase 3 results on their monoclonal antibody, donanemab, where previously accelerated approval by Lilly was rejected in January based on the limited data available at the time. However, it is widely expected for Lilly to file for full approval by the end of this year based on the positive phase 3 results. A couple of years ago, we've seen Biogen file for the first approval of a disease-modifying therapy in AD and receive, again, accelerated approval on their aducanumab drug. It was the first approved approval of an AD drug in more than 20 years and the first disease-modifying treatment, while we had symptomatic treatment approved previously. It was, however, a highly controversial process as the phase 3 data or the phase 3 study that Biogen ran wasn't conclusive, and the accelerated approval was partially supported by positive phase 3 results and the inconclusive phase 3 data. However, reimbursement was then rejected by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, CMS in the US, and Biogen has later announced to halt commercialization of the drug. Separately, Roche have completed a phase 3 study on the gantenerumab drug, but those results read out negatively in November last year and development has been stopped. However, there's an alternative formulation that is still under development at Roche. So clearly, it was a long journey to develop successful monoclonal antibodies to target amyloid in Alzheimer's disease. But it is very clear that the recent positive phase 3 results we've seen on 2 separate drugs from Eisai and Lilly has already moved us into a new era in terms of AD treatment. And it is now widely expected those drugs to become available at scale and being reimbursed over the next 5 years. So with that background, I would like to move on to the next slide to talk a little bit about a key side effect in those anti-amyloid therapies that requires monitoring by MRI. So amyloid-related imaging abnormalities, again, it is the key side effect of those drugs and it does require regular safety monitoring from MRI. There are 2 types of ARIA, hemorrhages and edema, referred to as ARIA-H and ARIA-E, and we observe around 15 to 30% of cases treated with those therapies in the phase 3 trials, showing either ARIA-E or ARIA-H, with significantly lower percentage developing symptoms from those side effects. It is a well-known side effect for years as anti-amyloid therapy was developed and is therefore well understood in clinical trials, and regular safety monitoring is performed as part of developing those drugs. IXICO has a track record delivering ARIA safety reads in 80 clinical trials for more than 10 years. As those drugs now enter clinical practice, we do see a requirement for regular safety monitoring in clinical practice. The Aduhelm and the Leqembi labels by the FDA, based on the accelerated approval, require around 3 safety monitorings safety MRIs within the first 6 months, and 1 safety MRI within 1 year of treatment initiation. Clearly, this poses a significant challenge for widespread adoption and prescription, as the healthcare system simply isn't ready to provide those safety reads at scale, as to date, the assessment has been limited to clinical trials with expert reads provided through central services and central platforms like the one we are offering into clinical trials. If you go to the next slide, please. Here we're looking at potential phases of rollout of this novel treatment into clinical practice and what the requirement for an ARITA solution may look like. We are now in stage 1, where we have drugs that have received accelerated approval from the FDA and have gone through successful phase 3 trials, where there are sponsor-initiated and sponsor-controlled phase 4 studies that are being planned to support approval if that's not received, and specifically to develop evidence to support reimbursement. We see this as the first stage in those drugs moving away from clinical trials into clinical practice. And we are currently discussing with different potential partners to engage in those studies with pharma sponsors, providing a service not too dissimilar from the one that we provide into clinical trials. The next stage that we see is local prescription by centers of excellence, potentially or likely combined with reimbursement by small insurers and private payment. We've seen the decision by the VA already on reimbursing Leqembi. This then moves provision of an ARIA service slightly further away from the control of a clinical trial, and we expect second opinion safety reads to support those kind of applications, where a central read service similar to what we see in clinical trial can be provided to support prescription at those centers of excellence. Further away, we see more widespread reimbursement and prescription, where we see adoption at a larger scale. And at this point, ARIA safety monitoring will likely require support by automation, as it can't be handled by a visual assessment by radiologists. IXICO is well positioned to support services for ARIA read across all 3 stages. As I said, we do have a track record to deliver ARIA reads in clinical trials. We're doing this for more than 10 years. And this will not be dramatically different as we see phase 4 trials. For stage 2, again, we have experience providing a second opinion safety monitoring into post-market surveillance. And on the next slide, I will show our assessor product that was developed to provide that service in MS and can be transitioned into an application in Alzheimer's and ARIA. Finally, as we enter mass adoption and widespread prescription of those drugs requiring safety monitoring at scale, we are well positioned to develop and deliver AI-based solutions to support automated decision-making based on our track record and history of delivering automated MRI solutions into clinical trials for more than 15 years now. If you go to the next slide, please. As I said, here I'm just showing very briefly and recapping what we have presented in public in the past, a pilot study that we run with Biogen on post-market safety assessment, where IXICO has developed and launched a platform to provide a second opinion safety read from imaging in a post-market study in MS. This was for Biogen's MS drug Tysabri, and was designed to monitor a rare side effect called PML and provide a second opinion expert read to local centers in case of for suspicious cases. The platform was rolled out in multiple territories across Europe and was successfully deployed in more than 30 centers. It didn't go beyond pilot stage at the time, but this was linked to the commercial plans of Biogen on the drug, and also the fact that PML is a much rarer side effect than what we see in ARIA, with incidence being in the low single-digit numbers compared to the 15 to 13% that we've seen for ARIA. The platform has been developed with a potential application in ARIA monitoring in mind, again, with our partners at Biogen at the time, and therefore is ready for potential deployment in that application. And we are currently exploring several partnership opportunities to deploy that platform in post-market studies as a starting point to then develop and support ARIA safety monitoring across the 3 stages I have laid out on the previous slide. In parallel, and for future, we are starting different initiatives with both academic and pharma partners to develop AI-based decision support for ARIA monitoring, and see this as a potential complement for the radiology-based assessment that we see in the short term to address the problem. And with this, I'll hand back to Giulio.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm going to summarize the highlights of what we've talked about today. So as you can see from the presentations, we've seen what we know now is the final period of comparative revenue impact of the large phase 3 Huntington's trial cessation. We now have the benefit of an increased diversity of revenue base, de-risking future trial de-scopes. We've got 11.6 million of contract wins in the past 12 months. We have an order book that's now tilted to earlier stage trials, which means significant latent value from future uncontracted trials. We also have the broader progress and the anticipated drug approvals in Alzheimer's, led by major pharmaceutical companies, providing a strong opportunity for IXICO for post-marketing surveillance. We have a very strong cash balance sheet of £5 million, and we have a path to driving gross margins back to historical levels. So with that, that's conclusion of the presentation, and I'd now like to open to Q&A.
Giulio, Grant, Robin, thank you very much indeed for updating investors this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab just on the right-hand corner of the screen, but just while the company take just a few moments to review your questions submitted already, I'd just like to remind you that a recording, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, will be accessed via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Giulio, Grant, Robin, as you can see, you've had a considerable number of questions from investors, so thank you firstly to everybody for your engagement this afternoon. If I may hand back to you, Giulio, to manage that Q&A, and then I'll pick up from you at the end.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you. So that's the first question from Mark A. Is, are you seeing any material impact from the cuts to R&D budgets, and what, if anything, can you do to mitigate this? So I think it's fair to say as I mentioned, we have seen longer periods of contracting and project startup. And so yes, we have seen evidence of that, but again, I'd say, remember, we've got a small market share in a relatively large market, which is growing. So the way we're mitigating it is doubling down to make sure that we tell more people what great products we have, and try to be their partner of choice. In actual fact, I think it provides us with an opportunity because the pharmaceutical industry is very conservative. It's difficult to get in front of clients. So we see it as an opportunity for a company of our size. But of course, it means that we have to build that commercial team to go out and do the outreach. We're not, to go out and win people's favor. But it is, I would say, and Grant talked to it, I think it is a tighter market, and the way that we plan to mitigate is to, as you've seen, continue to invest in our differentiation, which is predominantly from the advanced analytics, but also at the same time continue to be ready to deliver projects. And so building that operational capability is also an important part of our strategy to win in the marketplace. So the next question I'll direct to Grant from Shagar S is, when is the actually cash received on contracts compared to when the revenue is recognized? Grant.
Yeah, so So essentially, we have a service-based revenue recognition model. So as we deliver our services, whether that's project management, site management, and analysis, radiological read, we invoice and we recognize that revenue in the months that's delivered. So in terms of what that means in practice, we recognize the revenue, for example, in May. We would invoice for that work in May, and there'd probably be a 60-day payment term attached, so the cash would come in a couple of months later. We do have clauses in our contracts that allow for some advance payments for some particular aspects. So we do carry a little bit of deferred revenue, but by and large, our cash and revenue recognition are matched.
Thank you, Grant. Whilst you're on a roll, I'll give you another question. Actually, I'll answer. I think you'll add it. You'll add further details. So Tom M asks, what further investment is needed in terms of the IT infrastructure? So my preliminary answer to that is that we've made considerable investment in our IT infrastructure in the last 2.5 to 3 years, but there's always going to be some. Obviously, as a technology platform and technology develops, but I would consider that it's been a particular area of focus, and rightly so, for the reasons that Grant made. But I would expect that level to not be repeated in the coming near term. But I'll hand over to Grant to add a little bit more detail to that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Julio, and of course that's right. We have had a very much a focus on our IT infrastructure, not only in terms of the on-premise infrastructure that we have in place for all of our existing client trials, but also the investment that we've been making in our next generation trial tracker platform, which is obviously the cloud infrastructure. Now, I think any organization in the sector that we're in who is not expecting to continue to invest in their IT infrastructure is likely to encounter issues fairly quickly with the technology and the risks associated with technology changing so quickly. There is always going to need to be that level of ongoing investment around data security risks, resilience, etc. But we have invested significantly over the last few years to put ourselves right at the front of where we'd like to be in that respect. And actually, some of the advantage of investing in the cloud is that where things change and technology changes, the cloud is being regularly and continuously updated by Microsoft. In our case, they're investing huge amounts and will continue to invest huge amounts. And the platform that we operate on top of that cloud benefits from those investments that Microsoft are making. Whereas for a company that is purely reliant on on-premise solutions, they're constantly going to have to continue and probably rapidly increase the volume of on-premise infrastructure investments. So you're never going to stop investing in your IT infrastructure. Or you shouldn't be, but we have invested significantly, and we will see that level coming down over the next few years.
Great, thank you. So let's have a look. There are a lot of questions here. Let's have a look. Lionel H. I'm trying to be balanced across a number of people rather than sort of one particular person. But if the worst for the company is truly behind us and the revenue growth is set to increase again, then with £5 million cash in the bank, the company's obvious takeover target, please comment. So I'll take that one. Obviously, I can't comment with a specific there other than to say, we obviously as a management, we feel that our market capitalization doesn't reflect the true value of the business. Our view is that we are clearly bigger and better than we were 2 years ago, and that doesn't seem to be reflected in our share price. So the best thing we can do is continue to do what we believe is the right thing to do. And of course, with the £5 million that we have, we feel we have a strong balance sheet and debt free as well. So we feel well positioned to be able to execute on some of the plans that we've laid out. There's another question from Shegares, which is kind of linked, I guess, and says, could we see capital raise as the 5 million cash levels decline in the next 12 months? And to that, I would say that's a very healthy position to be in for a company of our size, given the investments we've already made in the last 12 or 18 months. So we don't have a technology deficit in our infrastructure or our data platform. So it's really a question of how boldly we want to go after those market opportunities, and that's obviously something that we monitor continuously, and we'll do so in what we feel is the best way for the business for the long term. So let's go to another question. Sam M, given your strategy is to gain phase 1 and phase 2 contracts, seemingly based on the theorem that you will not get appointed a phase 3 trial without being previously on the phase 2, why do you think you might gain an area market surveillance contract? Is it not is not an in-market surveillance contract an effective mega phase 3 trial? I think, Robin, that's one that you'll be well versed in being able to answer, I think.
Sure. There's obviously some truth in that, insofar that if the pharma company might want to work with whoever developed the phase 3 trial in terms of the imaging requirement. First of all, I guess without breaking confidentiality, we did work on some of the phase 3 trials that were mentioned. So we have contacts into pharma companies running the relevant clinical trials. The other comment is, I think, on maybe the last bit, isn't it a mega phase 3 trial? It's a quite different trial insofar that quite different requirements so far that some of the services delivered into clinical trials, like the very rigorous qualification of sites and so on, will relax as we go into post-market surveillance, and therefore it is a slightly different contract. And I think that links potentially to a separate question I've seen around size of those kind of contracts. And the last point I would like to make is that one strategy of the following is to develop those kind of solutions through partnerships. Giulio has referred to a couple of examples on where we've successfully developed and launched new capabilities through partnerships with consortia or other entities. And this is one other avenue that we are following in terms of the post-market surveillance service model.
Thank you, Robin. I've got two questions for Grant from Shiga S. How will ChatGPT AI affect your business? Pause there. Small question.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I mean, I think I guess it depends on there are two elements to that question: what we can use it for, and I guess how it might be a threat, I guess, is the other element to that question. So, like many companies, there are opportunities for us to make use of ChatGPT or other similar AI-based tools. We do a lot of development ourselves. We have tools and processes internally already to do that efficiently, but there are opportunities to use things like ChatGPT to support the way that we develop, do some of the coding, the development that we do. And of course, there's efficiencies that ChatGPT and other systems can apply across the business. I think the other element, perhaps, to this question is really often something that and Robin often talks to this, so he may have a comment as well, but about the distinction between AI per se and applying AI in the context of the business that we do. Having AI is fine, but if you don't have the contextualized data to run it off, and you don't have the operational capability of getting the relevant data into that AI, then you don't have the capability that we have within IXICO. So it's not just about the AI, it's about having the algorithms that are driven off the relevant data, but also the fact that we are able to collect data from imaging centers all around the world, to bring that into a centralized system, to do that in a pseudonymized way that protects the identity of that data, that organizes that data in such a way that it doesn't get corrupted or errors don't creep in, that allows us then to run that AI on and then deliver that work back to the client. That is something that really sets us apart from many AI companies out there. And I think that, if you like, the AI threat is more to those companies than it will be to us in that respect.
Great, thank you, Grant. And just another question. Could you give more detail in what you mean by careful cost management and what cost savings are available?
Yeah, so I'm quite glad that question was asked, because essentially what we regard as careful cost management is not just saving cost. I mean, to a certain extent, anyone can save cost. You just take cost out of a business, but that doesn't necessarily make it sensible or appropriate. So in terms of what we regard as careful cost management, essentially it's an exercise that protects as far as possible the financial resources of the company, whilst at the same time not undermining the medium or long-term opportunity for that company to succeed. So that's how I define careful cost management. In terms of what that means and what are the specific opportunities to save costs, what we are able to do is we have, where we have known that we're going through a period where we've been declining revenues before we expect them to increase again. We have been careful with things like recruitment, so we've had a small reduction in our headcount, which has been natural. Where people have left, we have chosen not to replace. We've been very sensible and prudent in terms of the way that we look at external supply-based costs. So obviously negotiation of those costs is part of it, where we can bring things in-house. Recruitment, for example, we've been very successful at doing all our recruitment ourselves, where we have recruited, and that is a significant cost saving for us as a business. But also, going back to the technology question, where we utilize and are migrating to the cloud, how we use that cloud, how we set things up. That's been an exercise that's been done in-house, and has made sure that we're utilizing that cloud efficiently, and that we identify savings accordingly. And then more broadly, an ongoing approach for us as a business is how we do things with more efficiency. And so making sure that we are doing things as efficient as we can, we're increasing our productivity levels. That all ultimately relates to careful cost management.
Thank you, Grant. So then I've got 3 questions from Shegares, which I'll combine into one answer. I think one is, how will you increase the order book? There haven't been many contracts won this year. And what's your biggest challenge? So I group all of those in. As I said, going forwards, our focus is very much on the development of the order book, and to continue to do that in an accelerated pace. I mean, earlier we talked about how we have seen contracting taking longer, startups taking longer. So those are obviously the dynamics. But as I said earlier, we're very successful when we get in front of customers. We're very able in being able to articulate the added value that we can provide with our platform and our analytics capabilities. So our biggest challenge really is to build that commercial capability so that we're in front of people and we're able to tell them, and we don't want to remain the best kept secret in the neuroimaging world. So hopefully that gives a rounded answer to all of those 3. So that's our biggest challenge, is basically as a relatively small company competing with much larger organizations, many of which are in North America. That's our biggest challenge, is to be seen and be heard in that environment, which is probably a little bit more competitive now than it would have been a couple of years ago, but holds many opportunities for a company of our IXICO size, and especially with the backdrop of the developments in Alzheimer's, which is why in particular we're doubling down on the opportunity in Alzheimer's. And I think that's all the questions. There's one more from Sam M. Maybe we can finish off on that one, just to, which talks to asking the size of what a contract for area market surveillance might look like. And I think Robin went some ways to answering that, but just to, I mean, without putting a number on that, just to put some numbers for people to extrapolate their own. In the US, there's around about 6 million people suffering with Alzheimer's. Proportion of those, it really comes down to what's the proportion of those that might be prescribed the drug, and work your way backwards from that. But clearly, significant contracts that are significant work needs to be done in the next year to 2 years by these pharmaceutical companies. The FDA commissioners already signaled that there's going to have to be continued data to be supporting the reimbursement of these drugs. So we anticipate pharmaceutical companies will be spending their dollars to support the adoption of these drugs in the market that they've spent billions of dollars developing. Thank you.
That's great. Grant, Julio, Robin, thank you very much indeed. And I think you've addressed all the questions from investors. And thank you once again for your engagement this afternoon. Julio, I know investor feedback will be particularly important to you and to the rest of the management team. And I'll shortly redirect those on the call to give you their feedback. But before doing so, I wondered if I may, Julio, just ask you for a few closing comments and then I'll redirect investors.
Yeah, so again, closing comments is I hope we've provided you with the information you need to make your own assessments in terms of the value of the platform that we built and our ability to address the market opportunity. And I want to thank you all for your attendance today and wish you well for the rest of your day.
That's great. Julio, Grant, Robin, thank you once again for updating investors this afternoon. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as we'll now automatically redirect you for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the company can better understand your views and expectations. This may take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly welcomed by the company. On behalf of the management team of IXICO PLC, we'd like to thank you for attending today's presentation and good afternoon to you all.